Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if people haven't been able to figure out, apparently the dress code for today is not a three-piece suit. I didn't get the memo. But I am in costume today, so as Brad said earlier, I'm going to ask you to vote early and often for myself. Who thinks they know who I am? Don't say, but who thinks we can guess? All right, I got some clues here for you. I'm a fictional literary character. Doesn't give you a lot. What's that? No. No guessing out loud, but do want to spoil it for everyone else. Or guessing out loud. We'll go through these today. Indeed. John Watson, 21B Baker Street. So about the real me. My name's Liam Dempsey, and I'm a communications designer working in print and web. I started my own company back in, well, over 10 years ago, back when I moved to the UK. I spent 7 or 8 years in the UK and moved back to the US in 2009. Despite the downturn, my company, LB Design, was doing pretty well. So I had the opportunity to grow. I've now got an office in London, and I work out of Philadelphia. I got into WordPress in 2007. I'd heard of it beforehand, but I Googled myself on a sunny day in 2007, and I wasn't on the first page. And I said, well, that's a problem. So I set myself up a WordPress blog, and I've been the #1 entry ever since. So thank you, Matt Mullingwig, and all things WordPress. And as Brad mentioned, earlier this year, I co-founded the Philly Burbs WordPress Meetup, with his wonderful blessing. These guys do great work. If you've been to the WordPress Meetup in Central Philly, it's fantastic. But if those of you who live in the farther reaches of Philadelphia know, sometimes the highway's it's tough to get out on a weeknight to come in. So we've got a meetup coming up on November 5th, and my co-organizer and co-founder, Corinne Tosona, is here, although not in my presentation. She's on the user track today. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what are templates from a web standpoint, and why do they matter to us as designers. We're going to talk about how WordPress uses templates. So we'll get a little bit general, and then we'll get into WordPress specific. And then we're going to talk about content types within WordPress. What content types does WordPress use? What we're not going to cover today, just so everyone's clear and understands where we're going, is we're not going to talk about design styles or best practices. I'm going to assume you know how to design, and your style might be different from mine. Yes?
What's your Twitter username so we can tweet things?
Liam Dempsey.
First and last name. Thank you.
No Watson Twitter name. I did do business cards with Watson, just in case people didn't get it. But we're not going to write any code today. Although I consider myself a designer who codes, we're not going to do any of that today. This is a design track, so we're going to steer clear of code. And we will not talk about forensic science methodology of the 19th century, despite my character. So, who are you guys today? You know, I'm guessing that you might be print designers, you might be illustrators, you may be new to designing database-driven websites, maybe used to static HTML, or maybe you're even new to WordPress entirely. So that's what I'm going to be talking to. That's that level of understanding about WordPress. It was a science methodology statement. So within WordPress, I'm sure you've heard about it enough to know that it's very, very scalable. It's very tailorable. You can get it to do really whatever you want. New York Times runs off WordPress. Grandma's wet little blog that she blogs once a week runs off WordPress. So you can do just about anything. But what I'm going to be talking about today really is just a simple, standard, if ever there is a simple and standard configuration of WordPress. We're not going to try to get too fancy. We're not going to get carried away. So if your knowledge is more than the level I'm speaking at, you're going to say, well, of course you can do it another way. Yes, of course you can. You can tailor anything you want with WordPress. But we're going simple, clean, and standard, given the audience that we're going to be talking to today. So to give you a little bit of understanding about where I'm coming from, why I'm up here, what my vantage point is my business, LB Design. We use WordPress on a daily basis to build small, medium, and large sites for businesses and nonprofits. But it's very much a brochure-style website. It's not any sort of web apps or anything on the back end. We've built 5 to 10 page websites. We've built sites with hundreds and hundreds of pages, all with WordPress. So my presentation today is really about WordPress as a content management system and how you design for that. We need to understand that WordPress is how we get content to the front end of the website. So we want people to come and see our website or the website of our clients. WordPress is going to do the work for us in getting that content from the database and bringing it to a browser and showing it to our clients' clients. And we really need to understand how WordPress thinks so we can create designs that work well. As a designer, as a web designer, you don't need to know how to write code. You don't have to write PHP. You don't have to be able to do JavaScript. But you have to understand how that medium works, what their code does. When the developers sit down and write things that turn our designs into beautiful websites, what does that actually do? So we have to understand that, one, so that we can communicate it to our own clients, but also so that we can design things that our web developers won't curse at us when they try to build. So what is a template within web design? And I'm going to talk about it as, I mentioned this earlier, I'm going to say it over and over throughout the course of the presentation, is that templates are how WordPress controls where and how content is displayed on the front end of a website, on the user side. Yes, there's other elements involved in there, there's CSS, but we're not going to get into that. But the core structure is all run through WordPress. So what is our key concept from our presentation today? One thing we want to remember? We want to remember that WordPress relies on templates to deliver web page designs and layouts. So we really have to appreciate that everything is template-based, template-driven. It's getting warm with that. I'm going to take this off. It's actually really warm hats. Does anybody else own a bowler hat? Yeah, I just started owning one. I didn't own one before last week. It's quite warm. So, if you can get your head around templates, if you can understand templates, if you can appreciate what it means for you as a designer, then you're in luck, because you can design for WordPress. But why does design matter? Why do templates matter to us? So let's try to get our heads around kind of the nuts and bolts of it, the meat of it, if you will. Well, designs for our content must fit the structure. Content can only go where WordPress tells it to go. So we come up with a web page design or a layout, and we say we want this here and with this there and somewhere else, something else on the page, and we pass those designs along to the developer. If it's not in that design, the developer won't build the template to accommodate it. So we can't have an 11th hour, oh, but what about this thing that I meant to put in there? Well, the template doesn't have it there. The design doesn't have it there. It's not like print design where you can just open up your InDesign file or your Photoshop file, your Illustrator file, flip to the appropriate page or artboard or layer, and drag the picture in of the CEO or put that chart in. There's more steps involved in that. So we really need to appreciate that templates will only do what we tell them, and it's an involved process. The other thing to keep in mind about templates is, just like in print design, the greater number of spreads you have to do, the number of different layouts, different number of creative concepts, the more templates you do, the greater the cost. So when you're thinking about your projects and you're talking to your clients and you're trying to figure out what to tell them from a price structure, you got to keep in mind that the more different designs that you're going to build, you might be willing to do the design work for that. If you're trying to get this client, it's a great project, you really want to do it, maybe it's a nonprofit, you want to support the cause. But you got to keep in mind that the more templates, the more designs you create, it makes more work for somebody else, and therefore it's more cost. They're likely to be more cost. Web templates are very different from print design. We talked about our InDesign file, we've got a brochure. The client calls us up and says, oh, by the way, we need to put the boss's picture on page 4 next to his testimonial there. Okay, fine, you open up the file, you drag the image box, you pop it in, you maybe move it around, add a drop shot or treatment. You can PDF it for print and you're good to go. But it doesn't work like that with web templates, because you have to, yes, we still have to do the design, but we have to consider how the template is going to manage that. And template is part of a content management system. It's a system. It's not something that's ad hoc. So there are rules and conditional statements that we need to be aware of, or at least our developer needs to be aware of, and we need to appreciate that those exist. So what are 2 big issues that print designers struggle with when they first start to get into web design? One is the fluidity of web presentation. Now I'll explain what I mean by that in just a minute. But the other issue is the rigidity of the web template. We talked a little bit about this already. Talk more about it in a few more minutes. And to be perfectly honest with you, back when I started building database-driven websites, I know I struggled with these two issues. Took some time to get my head around it and the practical implications of what that meant as a designer. So what do I mean by the fluidity of web presentation? It's kind of a vague phrase. So the real trick or the real issue is the limited display control. We make a website, our developer builds it exactly how we want it to be built. But that's where it stops. We have no control over how the people coming to the site choose to get there. Do they want to use a phone? Do they want to use a laptop? Do they want to use an iPad? Are they going to use Opera? Does anybody use Opera? Maybe some people use Opera. Are they going to use Chrome? Are they going to use some other Internet Explorer? Are they going to use IE6 still? Are they stuck on some old big company site organization where they don't have access to it? So unlike the print brochure that once we put it on the envelope, comes off the press, we put it in the envelope and we mail it to our client, it doesn't really make a difference if they're in the office or they're at home or in their car. When they pull that brochure out of the envelope, it's the same brochure. The font size is going to be exactly the same. The layout is not going to move. There's nothing that's going to be any different. It's static. It sits there. There's a lot of beautiful things about print, but we control what that presentation is. We don't have that in web design. Fonts are dealt with differently, slightly. Margins are slightly different from browser to browser. And then in recent years, we started to run into the issues caused by responsive design. How many people have heard of the phrase responsive design? So does everyone pretty much know what it means then? Yes? Okay, great. So it's all about making decisions as to whether or not, sorry, let me read my screen. The screen and purposes, and that's exactly it. Considering the content and method of delivery, depending on the device that the person's using. So to give an example, this is a blog for a law firm out of the Chicago and Wisconsin area that we launched earlier this month. And this is it in Firefox for Mac. WordPress blog, by the way. And this is it on the iPhone 5, which is another issue that popped up. If you know anything about responsive design, a lot of the designs had to be adjusted when the iPhone 5 came out because it's longer. And if you switch your iPhone 5 to landscape, the previous settings could cause problems. So it's a constantly evolving thing. You turn your brochure or your direct mailing piece sideways, nothing changes, it stays in shape. So what do we mean by the rigidity of web templates? What is that all about? And when I initially put this bullet point up, I had that content management systems are stupid. And what I meant by that is they will only do exactly what we and our web developers tell them to do. They cannot guess our intuitions. They don't understand, oh, but I meant this. We have to tell them exactly what we mean. And so that means things like, what is the rollover going to do? Well, we have to tell somebody what that rollover is going to do. We can't just say, okay, in my visuals it's blue, but when it rolls over it turns green. We've got to show them that. If content only shows up on a certain page under certain conditions, we need to make that very clear, or our template, our content management system won't do that. And so, unlike print design, where when we're done with the design piece and it's ready to go to the printing press, that's it. There's nothing more to worry about. Yes, we have to worry about the colors and the paper come out right, and then they store it and fold it and that sort of stuff. But it's much more finite than it gets into with web. So we have to be very, very particular about what we tell our designer and our developer, to do. But on the upside, the beauty of a template is once it's in place, you can apply it to as many different pages as you want. So if you're used to doing static HTML sites, or you've done a few of them and you wanted to add subpages with the same look and feel, you'd have to copy and paste and adjust things a little bit here and there. And now just once the template's there, you're good to go. So if your About Us page layout has the same design, look and feel layout as the services page, well then you can use the same template. So you can apply your template to as many different combinations as you want, as long as it has the same look and feel. Does that make sense? Cool. Starting to think maybe that Even the three-piece suit is getting a little warm. These are really
Liam
inexpensive. but-
Dempsey stripping.
No. Many, many layers, and it will not go that way.
Hey, we'll vote you if you do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was told by my son to come home with the iPad, but I'm pretty sure my wife would say not at that cost. Especially since I believe this is being filmed. That will just, it's going to be best for everybody. Brad, edit this out, please.
You can use your hat. You can wear your hat.
Yeah, no. So what are some key points about templates within WordPress? So we talked already to kind of get our heads around a little bit in as quick a time as we kind of could, because it's a reasonably short presentation, to talk about templates. But what does WordPress do with templates? And one of the important points to keep in mind that the header and the footer files are typically shared across your entire theme, across your entire site. Which makes sense if you think about it from a designer's perspective. Generally our banner looks the same and our footer looks the same on every page. A few things might vary here and there. But we want that consistency of design so that when people come to our websites, they don't get confused, they don't get lost. We're not moving the home button, we're not moving the contact us button about the page so that they get frustrated and leave. It's hard enough to keep people on our sites in this day and age, much less moving the home button on them. That was a registered click, excellent. So we need to realize that unique page layouts require their own template. And that's WordPress is just the same as any other content management system. So if we want to have a different layout, we have to build a separate template for it. Again, going back to our simple installation of WordPress. So WordPress is the same as other content management systems that way. Sidebars, so things in the left column of a website or in the right column will also have their own template. Or they could have their own template. Footers can have their own templates. And of course, if we're going from a theme that we like and we just want to tweak some things here and there, we don't start everything from scratch. That's one of the real beauties of WordPress. But let's say the theme that we have chosen, we want an additional layout. We want something a little bit different that our current theme doesn't provide or offer. Well, we can always add templates. So we can create additional designs and use the same theme. And it's more work than not having additional layouts, but because we're using that theme and we're just adding one extra piece, it's less work for our developer than starting from scratch. So how many people actually have WordPress sites right now that they're running and playing with? Okay. So you all recognize this, I hope. And if you log in and go to the appearance editor, so this is the page we're on within WordPress. And these are all our themes. I'm not going to read them all to you since you all have WordPress sites available to you. But you can see that there's a lot of different themes. And so we need to think about, from a design perspective, what's going to happen on all of these pages. Now there might be more themes in there that are more templates in there that we need. For example, there's an author template and a category template. Well, if your installation of WordPress is really small and you don't have any sort of blogs and you're just having single pages, you can get rid of a lot of these templates. You don't have to design for them. But if you're designing a blog, you've got to take the time to design it. And so that means extra work in InDesign, extra work in Photoshop or in Illustrator or wherever you create your web artwork. By the way, don't use the editor to edit code if you can help it. It's not a great way to do it. So as we move along here, what are WordPress's 3 content types? Posts, obvious enough. It's history of blogging software. Of course, they're going to have posts in there somewhere, right? They're going to be pages. And the latest edition we heard is Jason this morning rapping about custom post types since version 2.9. And we're going to go through all of these in a little bit of detail, as much as time allows for this morning. And we'll talk a little bit about how to design for them as well. So what about posts? What do we need to know about posts in WordPress? Perhaps not surprisingly, the use for the blog section, the news, the updates, whatever you call your regularly updated section, firm news, business news, whatever works for you, client, and your project, this is where your blogs generally will go. But as you probably have seen, the content from your blog posts don't have to just sit within the blog section. You might pull in 3 or 4 of the latest into a sidebar or put one of them on the home page to encourage people to read that one. Maybe you put it in the footer somewhere. So you can really push them around using WordPress. And sorry, just to go back to that last point, it's important to know that because as a designer, you need to be able to design how the blog posts are going to look. You might want it to look differently on the home page when it's just a single post than when it's sitting on the blog page and there's 10 per page or however many you decide to have. As you guys know, you all have your own WordPress installations. Post type all have a lot of different categories, a lot of different fields that they come with. So they come with a whole bunch of them, things like the title, the content. Are you going to have an excerpt? What category are you going to put it in? There's all these different ones. I haven't listed them all. If you log into your WordPress, you'll see it as you just review the page. But it's also important to know that you can add a custom field. So maybe you're a travel blogger, and one of the things you always want to put on in every post is where you were when you were writing that post, or where you were when you were taking that picture. Because it might be kind of interesting after a year to see of all the different places you traveled, where did you actually write the post about that time you went to Cappadocia? Or maybe you were already back in the airport in Philly, or maybe you were a week later because you were just whatever, or maybe you were there. So you could have a custom field. So it might say, thinking about the presentational display on the front end of the website, it's the title of your post, maybe the date of publication, your name, and then published from or written from or inspiration conquered at or whatever little quip or pithy phrase you want to use to highlight that. So you can add custom fields to post types, to posts. So how do we design for them? What do we need to think about? Well, we talked a little bit about it. I mentioned it in a previous slide. We've got to consider the look of the content that we want to push on the page. And yes, WordPress will come out with its own default things. The theme will present that. But obviously, as designers, we want to control things. We want to do what we want it to look like, what our clients want it to look like. We need to consider whether or not we're going to use excerpts or the read more functionality built into WordPress. We need to think about will posts have a featured image. So that's a little thumbnail that sits next to the post. And if they do, for example, is every post going to have a picture? Clients, especially businesses, always want to have a picture with a post. But then about 3 months into publishing regularly, they realize they don't have any more pictures and they don't want to pay for them. So you need some sort of default image that loads, that at least makes some sort of sense and fits in with the design. So it's a minor point, but these little things that if you're not used to thinking about, you never get a brochure that says, what happens if we get to page 5 and there's no content? Well, it's a brochure. Of course there's going to be content on page 5. So it's a finite project where websites are ongoing. So we need to think more long term. And this last point is kind of key. All the posts will be formatted the same. Remember, it's a template. So unless they're not. So unless we tell WordPress, hey, make the first post different, or make the third post different, or make posts in this category different from the rest, they will always be the same. So we need to keep that in mind. So I'm thinking about, well, what are we going to write about? How are we going to blog about? Is this look and feel going to be appropriate for all the different types of post content we want to put onto the website? So then we've got pages. So what do we use pages in WordPress for? Well, obviously enough, it's elementary for pages. But we can also use pages to embed in other pages. For example, on the home page, we might have a little About Us section that is just a little article that sits on the home page. So it's an embedded page that sits within it. And I've got a graphic slide coming up later on, in just a few more slides, that kind of pulls this all together visually. You can use a page template to display posts or to display custom post types. So just like the blog page has all the pages listed there, you can create a template for that, a page template, and create that design, that look and feel. And just like posts, custom fields pages also come with custom fields. You can add your own custom fields and they come with set fields. So how do we design pages for WordPress? Well, one of the first things we need to think about is what content is going to go onto a specific page. So for an About page, what needs to be on there? For the services page, how do we want to think about that? How are we going to display that? How are we going to build that into the template, the design template? We need to think about different pages across. How many different layouts are we going to have? What are the cost implications for that? or the design implications from our standpoint. Every new page layout that we design as designers, we've got to charge somebody for, right? We need to think about whether or not the page is going to display its own content, like an about page, or whether or not it's going to run blog post content or custom post type content. By the way, I should have mentioned that these slides are already up, and I'll tweet out a link as soon as this is over. It's on my company website, so if anybody's interested in actually looking at it later, they'll be available. Although I'm a little worried because I put them on slide deck and I can monitor that, and if nobody comes, I feel really sad. So let's talk a little bit about custom post types. People heard of custom post types before? Does anybody have any idea what there are? Yes-ish? No-ish? Yes-ish? Ish? All right. That's a beautiful phrase, isn't it? Ish. So really, custom post types, the easiest way to think about it is it's for any type of content that you're going to repeat a lot across your site. So if you're building a website for a client who rents out apartments, they've got a bunch of different apartments to rent. And rather than having posts, you can do custom post type, calling it apartments or properties. And within that, you set your own custom fields, things like what's the address, what's the rent, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how big's the kitchen. And what you're doing then is making it that much easier to control and display that data. Because otherwise it just has to sit in the body part of your WordPress post, right? You could put all that information in a blog post, but there's no way to then pull out a single element. So maybe on the home page you want to display the best property with the highest rent so your client gets the most money, but unless that rent amount is sitting in a specific field, it's very difficult to do. So a better way, really, a better name would have been called a custom content type rather than custom post type. But Matt Mullingwig and powers that be at WordPress didn't email me and ask about my thoughts on it before they went live with it. I can't say I blame them, but because it really is a custom content type. You define what you want it to do and be. And I suppose they went with custom post type because it has some characteristics of a post and how it operates. The fact that you can push it around quite easily and you can tailor it in a lot of custom fields. But if you think about it as a custom content type, it's much easier to understand as a designer, and it's that much easier to explain to your clients who may have no design or no web experience from a production standpoint. Talked a little bit about this when we said why did they name it custom post type. It's because it has some of the functionality of a post. It built in some of that, so you can push it around the side. So our apartment listing that might sit on an apartment listing page has them all, but then when you go to our services page, maybe in the sidebar there's 3 or 4 properties there, and maybe on the home page there's there. So you can push it around a lot. As you might expect with custom being built into the name, the fields are completely customizable. You decide what content you want to collect from somebody entering the post into the website, and how you want to display it. And again, I kind of mentioned this earlier in the point about connecting with posts. You can push things all over the website with a custom post type, and that's a real nice feature about it. So how do we design for custom post types within WordPress? Well, one of the first things we need to do is we need to think about what data we're going to display. What fields do we want to have? So we're going to push this site along to our clients. They're going to pay us, and then they're going to go away and run their site. And invariably, they're going to be very busy running their apartment letting process. So part of the benefit of having these custom post types, these fields that we specify, is so they don't have to remember put in the rent amount. Because there's a field that says rent, and there's a field that says number of bathrooms, and there's a field that says number of bedrooms. But in order to design for those fields, you have to have the conversations with your client that says, well, what data are we trying to push? What information do we need to convey to the people coming to our website? So before we can design, we need to think about how we're going to actually do that. So we need to think about what fields we're going to include. But we also have to think about what parameters do we want to set for our fields. So for example, for rent, does rent have to be a number? What if somebody wants to put it in as a word, 1,200? Or maybe bedrooms, that's another probably more practical. Do you want to write the word 3 or the number 3? So that kind of thing. And for description of the property, do we want to limit it to a single sentence, or do we want to have maybe a paragraph? Maybe we want to allow for 4 or 5 paragraphs. Maybe we don't want to have any sort of links, so we limit that kind of content going in. So we need to talk about what information we want to convey, and then we need to think about what kind of limits we want to set on how that information is conveyed. Does that make sense? Got a little bit technically, a little geeky on there, everybody? We cool? Awesome. So how are we going to organize, just like with posts, how are we going to organize and display this? Are we going to display our apartments by rent, by bedroom number, by location? That sort of information needs to be thought about from a design perspective, from a user experience perspective, so that our web developer can build the site according to our designs. And again, the developer will only do what we tell them. So, in this last point, getting a little confused between the two little screens here. I'm standing in front of my computer, my connection, I normally walk around. So the last point again is thinking about what fields do we want to push elsewhere on the site. So thinking about our apartments, we don't really want the entire description of the apartment on the home page. We might just want to do the address, the thumbnail of the apartment, and maybe the rent and the number of bedrooms. So thinking about which fields go where on the site, how do we want to push that around, and is that being done in a consistent and well-designed manner? We've got a little graphic here, a little website for Sherlock Holmes's investigative service, consulting detective. So if this is our website, we've got our logo and our pithy little tagline and our navigation bar. That is our page template. The navigation, can everybody see what I'm pointing to here? The navigation, the logo, our tagline, our navigation, the background, the structure itself is the page template. This is our custom post type, and we've given it the name Team. We could have called it Detectives, we could have called it Mars, we could call it whatever we want to customize. We said, obviously make something to make sense so that when we come back to it 6 months later, we don't say, what the heck is Mars type? So it makes sense to name it. So this is a page template that is displaying custom post types. So let's break that down a little bit further. This bottom corner here should look like the previous slide that we had. So if we pull that out a little bit and we start to look at the custom post type, what do we actually have? We've got our different fields that we've set. We've got a name, we've got a job title, we've got an email address. You know, maybe we would have a phone number, maybe we would have school or professional association. We might have a longer bio. We might have a featured image. People know what featured images are? Featured images? Yes? Okay. So then if we were on this page here, and we were to click on Sherlock's picture or on his name, we would go to the individual page about him. So the full page about him, so you can go and navigate and read about all the great investigative work that he does. Incidentally, Jeremy Brett, best Sherlock Holmes? Yes? No? Others? Oh, old school, proper old school. Has anyone seen the new American one yet with
Robert Downey.
Up, Down?
Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, all right, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Either one. We accept all things Sherlock. So looking at this page here, we've got our custom fields again, the fields within our custom post type of team. We've got our name, we've got our job title, and we've got our email address, right? We've got our featured image. And then we've got our main content as well. So we're pushing this information, these fields that we've designed, we've told our developer to use, to make, so that our templates push the content around the site, so that we don't have to manually build all of these layouts by hand. So if we try to pull it all together, let's say this is our homepage of our detective agency website. And we'll just go through it now, highlighting the different types of templates that WordPress allows for, the different content types, and how you can pull it all together. So here's our content program, and I'm sorry this is a little bit small. I like animations in my presentations, but when you put them up on slide deck, it just lays it all flat. So you can't hide something because you just get a big stack of everything. So can everyone see at the bottom that this says content from page template? Okay, great. So if you were to log into your WordPress and go to pages and see home, this would be the copy that you edit. And then we could use some post types, so just posts of recent cases. Study in Scarlet, Sign in the 4, how Sherlock saved the day for a number of different people in Britain. And then we had embedded pages. So there might be a page called Why Choose Us that doesn't sit anywhere. You can't go to consultingdetectives.co.uk/Why Choose Us because it only sits within the home page. So it's a little call to action and it's an opportunity to do some marketing there, but it's an embedded page within the home page template. We've got our custom post type. Remember this from our previous page, our detective team. And you can see that we've only pulled 2 fields. We only want his name and his job title. We don't care about having his email address on the home page. We also want a thumbnail, a featured image.
And you also called upon just the one guy who satisfies the requirement of boss,
Yeah, really.
as opposed to everybody. That's something.
We're going to wrap up here shortly. I know we're running out of time. Got started late. Here we go. So how do we want to learn more? Short presentation. Clearly we're going to answer everyone's questions and make you all completely versed in it all. How can we learn more? Play around with your website. Try to make templates. Try to do a little bit of code so that you can figure it out. It's your own development site. You can break it. It's easy enough to reinstall and start over from scratch. That's a great way to learn. That's certainly how I learned a number of years ago. If you want a really good overview of custom post types, there's a guy by the name of Keith Devon. He runs the London WordPress meetup, and he's got a great little YouTube video about it. The codex. Is everybody familiar with the codex? So WordPress has all of its information on, go to wordpress.org codex, and you've got a lot of stuff on there. It's very cleanly and easily written, easy to understand. Google stuff. WordPress is the biggest content management system going these days in terms of popularity. And developers and designers love to blog about it, love to write about it, love to write how-tos. So invariably, whatever problem you're dealing with, somebody has already solved. So just Google it. 10 WordCamps, woohoo! You guys can tick that one off. Go to local WordPress meetups. The Philly one that Brad and Doug run is fantastic. The one that Corinne and I are fortunate enough to have an opportunity to organize does a pretty darn good job as well, I think. We've got a meetup coming up on the 5th of November in Westchester. We kind of float around Chester County and Montgomery County.
Is there a web link for that?
We're on the meetup site, meetup.com. We're going to debate. It's only our 4-month running, so we haven't done our own site yet. Can't be asked. So lastly, just a quick little review. I know we're starting to get a lot of noise from out in the hallway there. Understanding templates is the key to designing for database-driven websites. And once you get that, you've got to appreciate that WordPress uses these templates. So WordPress is no different than any of its other content management systems in that sense. The 3 content types: posts, pages, and custom post type. Think of custom post type as custom content type. And lastly, engage with the WordPress community. Just briefly, last year was my first time attending a WordCamp. I have to say I was just blown away, 1, by the knowledge and skill of people all around me, but 2, the lack of ego. People here, and hopefully it'll be the same again this year, are just willing to have conversations about WordPress. So whether you've got a problem or you just want to shoot the breeze about it, meet people, have fun. It's a great community. Lucky to be back here this year. Questions at this point, probably just do in the hallway afterwards. And as Brad said, please vote, and vote early, and vote often. Thank you for your time.